This is Minda Wilson with Urgent Care. I'm very excited to welcome Malcolm Bohm, President and CEO of Liquid Grid, interested in healthcare and social empowerment, two very important things in this day and age. And Malcolm, pleasure to meet you.
Good morning from San Diego. Nice to talk to you.
So how did you decide to put these two things together? Healthcare and social media and empowering people. How did that idea all gel and create Liquid Grid?
Yeah, interesting story of how the company matured. Originally, I built a technology platform that was listening across the web to what people were talking about. And in 2010, I realized, my goodness, as the internet explodes, people are going to talk about everything on the internet, including their healthcare. And so we built a technology that really harvests that information and tries to make actionable sense of it. As we moved through the last few years, we realized that we were actually really good at directly engaging healthcare consumers online, particularly on Facebook. And so we embarked on aggregating massive amounts of consumers into communities. And today we have a portfolio of about 16 to 20 communities with about 1.2 million healthcare consumers every day joining us and learning, supporting each other and getting educated about their healthcare. And the beauty of this model, particularly on Facebook, is that we have tremendous scalability to be able to get messaging and education and support content out through many millions of patients every day. So it's become a very exciting opportunity for us to have an impact. And as you said, our mission today is socially empowering healthcare consumers, and we're doing that every day.
So for somebody who's not so technically savvy, when you say you're listening and gathering healthcare data and putting these groups together, I don't really quite understand what that means. So how do you find these?
Yeah, let's say that you have made a comment on a website, or you have got a blog, or you're participating in a forum, you're speaking to people on Facebook, or you're tweeting something, and all of that content that is health related, we're picking that up. And we're just looking to see how can we understand what patients are saying, what healthcare consumers are saying about their healthcare. And the way the system works is we're looking for about 1,000 primary disorders on a daily basis and trying to pick up how are people talking about it? What are the issues that they're discussing? How are they discussing? What time of day? Who are they talking about? And what is the context of that discussion? To give you a simple example, I'll just speak about migraine. When I say migraine to you, you think headache, and you probably think pain, and you probably think severe and various permutations of it. What we're interested in understanding is what are the other ways that people talk about it? So we remove what we expected and look for the context. And the context could be, I'm going to settle into a dark room for the rest of the day. I'm going to hibernate in a cave. And by pulling out those specific insights, we can create empathy in our messaging that goes out to the community. So the software is actually very deliberately trying to find ways to become much more relevant to healthcare consumers to attract their attention.
So for people who are suffering from migraines, let's follow the example through. Do they look on your platform to see how they can better cope with migraines, or does your what do you do with all this information?
So when we build these communities, we have three basic tenets that we're looking to help consumers with. One is awareness, one is education, and one is support. And people come together around common issues. And so as people come into our communities, they find that there are large aggregations of people just like them suffering the same issues. And The consumer may understand that they have a problem. They may not understand the problem, the disease itself, and why it's occurring. Let's use a different example. We have a very large community of elderly patients with advanced heart disease. Now, when you say that you have bundle branch blockage or mitral valve regurgitation, these are complicated medical issues that many consumers understand that they may have, but they don't understand what it is. And additionally, how other patients are dealing with those same issues. So we bring people together and we educate them on those issues in fairly simplistic ways, but it makes a difference to them because they then take forward better management of their disease, better understanding of their disease, and also how other people are dealing with that disease. So there's all of these tenets of awareness, education, and support that we're providing on a daily basis across many, many diseases.
And so so you're creating a way for people that have a particular disease to communicate with each other, as well as aggregate data on the disease. So you might be able to use like an artificial intelligence framework and provide them with information that they may not know based on the comments of the people who you whose information you've accessed. Is that
That is correct. That is absolutely correct. Yeah. Let's take another example in the world of cancer. It's a dreadful word and none of us want to hear it. But if you have a diagnosis of cancer, chances are 95% of cancer is being treated in regional oncology centers, not the big Mayo clinics, Anderson clinics, cancer treatment centers of America, but out in the sticks. And for those people, they just don't have access to the resources that you may have in those fantastic centers. So what we're doing is helping spread the awareness and knowledge to as many people as we can to help them. And yes, we gather a lot of information about people because that allows us to be more relevant on many more topics to many more people.
That's interesting. But I also see an opportunity, like when it comes to clinical trials, if you have a group of people that are suffering from a certain cancer, let's say, then because you have a group of those people, it might be something that drug companies might be interested in connecting with those people and maybe offer them opportunities to participate in something like a clinical trial or something like that. Is that something
100%.
you do?
Yes, 100% right. Clinical trial recruitment is just one of the things that we support. If you think about it, we're recruiting patients every day. And then on behalf of commercial teams for commercial products or clinical trials for the R&D side of the business, we can message those aggregations of people about certain opportunities. And that's the commercial side of our business, is that we're providing opportunity for the enterprise, the companies, to get their specific messages out to more relevant people very efficiently.
And what's the draw? Why do people want to come to Liquid Grid? I mean, why? How do they find out about you, and what's the draw that makes them become a part of your community?
Yeah, well, first off, they don't come to Liquid Grids. Liquid Grids is the incorporation behind all of the communities. The communities themselves have their own brand. So, for example, our heart disease community is called Heart Health Connection. Our caregiver community is the Caregiver Connection. Our cancer community is the Cancer Connection. We have to advertise. That's the way of the world today. So we use our intelligence platform to create the best possible advertising and also to create the best possible content. And so we're putting out advertising on Facebook strategically to attract the attention of people for whom it is relevant. And they come in and they find other people there, they find good content, and they join us, and it just gathers momentum. We're typically growing our community base by about 100,000 people per month across all of our communities.
Wow. And then so it's and then there's sort of a snowball effect. you get, as soon as you reach a critical mass, it just starts expanding after that. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is correct, because of course the credibility and the authenticity of larger numbers of people that are highly engaged creates a level of trust. And as more people come in to see that, hey, there are now 50,000 people with tons of comments by people every day, they recognize, oh, this is a place that I might want to explore, and a lot of people will follow us and actively participate. Our job every day is to make sure that we're keeping engagement levels within our communities very high. We want to see that people are actively participating by commenting, sharing, reacting around the information that we're publishing every day.
So if somebody wanted to become a member of one of your communities, first they'd have to know what communities are available, and then they'd have to know how to join. So how do they get that information?
Yeah. So again, this comes down to advertising. We don't necessarily try and bring people to our website and then tell them about the community. We're doing most of our work on Facebook and using Facebook's pretty sophisticated set of tools to make sure that we're getting our information in front of as many people every day as we can. And that is done primarily through the form of strategic advertising. Now, our advertising is typically unbranded. It's not saying Liquid Grids. It's actually coming from the brand of that particular community. So, for example, in our wound care community, we're looking for people who are suffering from venous leg ulcers, chronic wounds, surgical wounds, diabetic foot ulcers. And so in our advertising, we're being very clear that come join the Wound Care Connection to learn how to better manage your wound. And when they get there, they see that there's information that's relevant to them. Now, obviously, we're very good at this. That's kind of the baseline of our business. We have very, very high skill levels and expertise on using Facebook to the nth degree that it can give us what we need.
So a lot of people, I want to focus a little bit. A lot of people today especially are interested in sort of what makes an entrepreneur, what drives them, and what made you get involved in starting a business. So what was that spark for you that you said, okay, well, the world needs this, I'm going to do it?
Well, in 2010, around about September time, I arrived in San Diego, and I went to the beach, as most people do, and I found that a lot of people were on their cell phones, texting, social media, blah. And I just looked at it and went, wow, there's just a whole different way to communicate today versus what I had come from in the pharmaceutical industry, which is this one-way traffic through the TVs and the radios, right? You get this advertisement, and then you get a whole bunch of sort of scary stuff at the end that says, if you take this, you may get this, and you may get this, and speak to your doctor if you get that. And you have no way to respond. But in social media, there was this whole new way to engage healthcare consumers. And I just went, wow, this is going to be the future. And actually, as somebody who's been in marketing and direct-to-consumer advertising for most of my career, this was just an aha moment. It was like, oh my goodness, we've got to jump all over this. So how do I build a technology that can actually take advantage of this? And the challenge we had back in the day was there's so much going on the internet. How do you get the good stuff? And that was the real challenge. But the epiphany for me was coming from the pharmaceutical industry. Sales forces were going down, rep access to physicians was disappearing, and the consumer was tuning out of the traditional way that we advertised. So here was a brand new way to do it. And for a fairly young guy who had lots of ambition to make a difference, that was just a no-brainer for me.
But think about that. So people are changing how they get access to information. I mean, it's radically different for my kids than it is for me, and it's even different from like my friends that have kids that are in high school from my kids that are in their 20s. So how do you I mean, how do you reach those people? Because there's different age levels, different ways of learning, different ways of accessing information. How do you get across the whole spectrum?
Yeah, well, certainly there are. You're absolutely right. There are different generational usages that we're seeing. So the much younger children, let's say high school into early college, they're using very different platforms today compared to, let's say, the older millennials and upwards. The reality is that Facebook is the mother of all. It's an enormous platform with a huge number of people. And as Facebook has matured, and Twitter to a certain extent, and then others that have matured for the younger audiences like Snapchat and Instagram, you choose carefully where you're gonna put your messaging out. Now, we do use a multi-channel approach, but strategically on Facebook, we focus our advertising around certain demographics, and about 70% of our community members across some of our communities are over the age of 55, 70% over the age of 55. Now, 5 or 6 years ago, people wouldn't have believed that people over the age of 55 were even on Facebook. Well, they're actually the biggest growing group on Facebook, and they happen to be the most sticky in terms of their participation on Facebook. So, as the social networks have matured, some have gone away in terms of their relevance to certain demographics, and some have become more important. And for us, Facebook has become a very important vehicle for connecting with the audiences that are generally aging into disease. We do have millennial audiences as well, but generally speaking, we're strategically going after people of a certain age group that are more likely to have certain diseases.
And how do you deal with the sort of fake news problem? Do you just let everybody put out what they're thinking and then sort of say this may or may not be good for you, or how do you manage that so people know that the information they're getting?
Yeah, it's very important. I mean, very, very important. So one of the sort of most time-intensive and resource-intensive parts of our job at Liquid Grids in each one of our communities is to curate it and to make sure that we're not getting inappropriate conversations, poor advice, or downright selling between people. And so we have to watch that very carefully. And there is a whole playbook that we have with policies and procedures for how we police what is going on. But I'll tell you, the big revelation relative to sort of the fake news and people recognizing that something is poor advice or erroneous, the crowd tells you very quickly. So I'll give you an example. If somebody says, take CBD, it will cure whatever, the people will come in and say, show me the evidence. Now, if it's truly erroneous, we would just remove that content, and we have to watch all content across all of our communities every day. But candidly, the communities actually flag it to us. They'll tell us directly by messaging us to say, hey, something's up. They'll tell the people who have posted something that it's not accurate or not relevant or not useful, and we spot that. And we're very careful to make sure that there are rules you can put behind each of these communities in terms of removing anything that has foul language, removing anything that may have certain terms or words in there that we don't want to have in the community. But it's an active part of our day-to-day work is to make sure that we're keeping the integrity of these communities. And I'll take this a little bit further. I get asked this a lot since the Cambridge Analytica scandal last year. And, a lot of people thought, oh boy, your communities are going to dissipate, people are going to leave. We didn't see any change whatsoever in the degree of engagement in our communities or the degree of growth of our communities. Very interesting that, despite an individual's concern about the integrity, let's say, of some of the work processes and ethics of big companies like Facebook, When you have such large aggregations of people, they do self-police, and you can spot the BS pretty quickly.
And when people call someone out, is there a process for getting them off a site, or making sure that people can come back in a different form, I guess is the question,
There is a process. I mean, if something is obviously offensive, that person is banned from the community immediately. There's no ifs and buts there. I had an example just the other day where somebody was talking about getting insulin really, really cheap at a Walmart, actually. And somebody called it out and said, that's just not true, and it's not safe. Insulin is insulin, and it's not available as some kind of cheap version at Walmart. And these are people who have type 1 diabetes or an urgent need to manage their insulin levels as type 2 diabetics. The exchange that happened became kind of caustic. So we hid the comment that was offensive, and we responded directly to that individual and said respectfully, please do not call other people whatever they said. And he responded to say, I'm sorry, and I will withdraw myself from the community. So there are protocols for these kinds of things. And thankfully, we have the tools available to us to either immediately remove somebody, to hide their content that's offensive, and to also engage with them to redirect them.
That's interesting. So I have a sort of different question. Are you subject to the same sort of privacy laws that doctors are in these communities, or can people self-identify? How does that work?
Yeah, so these are wide open communities, and people do self-identify, and they do give us enormous amounts of very detailed information about their health. And it's not really giving it to us as the brand, they're giving it to the others in the community. So if I said I gave an example for you that we asked, has anybody else here had more than 2 stents? Stents meaning the circulatory circuits that are put into your arteries and veins. And we had it's almost an informal competition. I'll give you one guess. How many stents do you think was the most that a person actually self-reported during that conversation?
Or
you probably think to yourself, I don't know, 9 or 10 or something like that. No, 33 stents. 33 stents. And that individual told us not only about the number of stents, but the ejection fraction that they have of their heart, and also the medications that they were taking. And this happens for us all day long. Now, to address your question about privacy, of course, we have to be very observant of the fact that people are sharing personal information. But to the extent of HIPAA, it's not protected information. HIPAA doesn't govern us because we're not actually capturing protected healthcare information. But privacy is an important part here. So people are giving up information to others in the community for the hope of either sharing or getting support or education. And we have to make sure that we respect the fact that people have given up that information under the auspices of education, support, and awareness to others within the community. So using that information has certain rules that we apply so that people are protected.
Wow. And is it just for the patients themselves, or do family members or people who are caregivers, do they get to participate in these communities also?
100%, yes. In fact, we have a dedicated community for caregivers. So that's actually elderly family caregivers that are taking care of elderly family members, typically with dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, those kinds of issues. In our cancer community, we have a lot of caregivers that are taking care of the patient with cancer. We have a community of parents that are taking care of children with developmental disorders. So it's not just the patient. And I should add that we actually have a community dedicated to healthcare professionals. We have 1.49 million healthcare professionals on a global basis in a community called the Faculty of Medicine. And it's generally physicians, they typically younger physicians, interesting, a little bit more digital savvy, and that is also a Facebook community. So patients, caregivers, loved ones, professionals, lots and lots of representation up and down the healthcare chain, if you will.
And if people want to contact those communities, like if an outside business wants to contact those communities to get information or opinions or just, sort of get feedback on something, do they do it through you?
Yes, they have to. There are two advantages of our model. When you create a Facebook community, you own it, and you have the exclusive right, therefore, to communicate to your members and various audience extensions that Facebook allows you to do. So you can try and intercept people on Facebook in all kinds of standard ways, but if you wanted to target specifically, let's say, one of our communities, you can only do that through Liquid Grids. And of course, that's the commercial side of our business, which drives our revenues, is that we are being contacted by the healthcare franchises to communicate, message, and advertise products and opportunities, services, devices, diagnostics, etc., to those communities where they're relevant.
So you figured out a model where you can not only help people on the one hand, but also you can make it self-sustaining financially so that you can continue to help people.
You got it. I have two sets of customers. I have a lot of customers that are consumers. It's about, if you take healthcare professionals and consumers, there's 2.65 million people as immediate connections. And then on the other side of the table, I have customers who are pharmaceutical companies, medical device companies, diagnostics companies, food, health, wellness, all kinds of different companies that have an interest in the overall healthcare space. And they're looking to connect, of course, strategically and in a good, highly targeted way to these types of audiences.
And how do those people find you? The people with the businesses that are looking for these populations, how do they reach out to you?
Well, of course, the communities themselves have quite significant reach. So we get found quite a lot because, if you go to the Heart Health Connection or any one of our communities, you will eventually walk back toward Liquid Grids because there is a way to find us. So that's certainly one way. The halo effect of having such an enormous footprint in the healthcare space helps us a lot. But you're speaking to the guy who pounds the streets to go and make sure that people in the healthcare industry know about what we're doing. And, to be honest, today that's a lot less challenging because we have such a large footprint of representation of consumers. So, radio shows like this don't hurt us either. We appreciate that opportunity too.
So let's say I'm a caregiver for someone that is suffering from Alzheimer's. So
yep.
And I want to participate in one of your communities. Do I go online and search community, Facebook community, caregivers, Alzheimer's, or let's say I'm interested in that, but I may not be on Facebook. What's the best way for me to reach out to you? I'm still a bit confused about that.
Well, there are over two-thirds of the U.S. population is on Facebook, and it's somewhat active there. And so today, the way people find things is sort of the twin engines of discovery. You go search for it on Google or Bing or one of the search engines, and our communities will be found there. you can in fact search for them because there is some indexing that's available. But the other way that people find information is on social, and Facebook is equally equal to Google in terms of the way people are looking for information. The intents of those searches are a little bit different. In search, I'm looking for information. On social, I'm looking for people and information. So more often than not, people are finding us because they search on Facebook. So if you look for caregivers on Facebook, it's very likely that we're going to be pretty prominent in your search results because our community is 120,000 people. And when you see a community of 120,000 people versus one that may have just a few hundred people, you immediately and naturally move to the one with the biggest number of fans. And then you go and look and, you'll see the content and people's engagement on issues that are relevant to you. And they can make the choice as to whether or not they want to like or follow that page. So more often than not, we're picking people up because of their activity on Facebook. And the pages are built specifically to make sure that when you make a search, that our pages actually are represented higher up in those search results when you're doing your searches.
So are people able to form support groups through your pages? So like the caregiver burnout is a very significant issue for that population. So, and they found that finding supportive, engaging groups has been helpful for those people. Is that something they can do through your organization?
So yes, they can. Although I have to say that we actually don't really develop groups on our community pages, and there's a commercial reason for that. Groups are really, really useful on Facebook, and there are literally hundreds of thousands of groups that are available. In groups, you can either have a closed group or an open group, and you can make that choice. And when you're in a group, when somebody else comments or posts something in a group, all the group members see that if they happen to be active on Facebook. And that's a very nice way to create activity within a group. But from a commercial perspective, we can't advertise in groups on Facebook as of yet. I think it's coming in the future, but as of now, you can't. So we keep our communities as community pages in order that we can leverage the advertising that's available.
Very interesting. Well, it's an amazing accomplishment that you've brought all these people together and that you've segmented them in a way that they get information that's targeted specifically to the kind of healthcare issues that they're dealing with. I find that fascinating. And that there are so many people that seem to be dealing with any of the particular issues that you've chosen. Did you pick these issues? Was there a reason, a method to your madness in picking particular issues, or are there more issues you're thinking of adding? How do you determine what communities you're going to put together and what you're not?
Yeah, well, certainly we have many more communities that we're envisaging. We have ambition to create many more. It's a question of resource and capabilities around that. But when you think about the burden of disease out there, heart disease, cancer, GI disease, pain, diabetes. These are all pretty big and pervasive problems in society today. So it was relatively straightforward for us to use those large therapeutic categories to be our starting blocks. And so those, part of the reason was because of the extent of disease. Part of the reason was because of the extent of the portfolios of, let's say, the pharmaceutical industry that align to those big diseases. There's a lot of focus, of course, in diseases of the aging because the populations are aging so quickly today. But there are areas of healthcare that, absolutely we want to get into. Pain is one where we're just on the cusp of making a big play into pain. We're also on the cusp of making a big play into sleep. Now, I'll just remind you that any person that is in any one of our communities, they're engaging with us and in that community under the umbrella of what that community is about. So if you look at our diabetes wellness community, well, that's speaks for itself. They're there because of their diabetes. But that doesn't mean that they don't have pain problems. It doesn't mean that they don't have GI problems. It doesn't mean that they don't have sleep problems. But they've engaged with us about their diabetes. So we choose the communities that make the most sense in terms of the numbers of people that we could positively affect, and of course, aligning that to the commercial opportunities that we have. I would say one last thing about the portfolio is that it's really interesting when you look across all of our communities, irrespective of how they've been built and what the sort of driving medical condition is. We look at these as haystacks, and under every haystack, there is a needle or two. And we've actually got a great model we have a great model for supporting the identification and support of people with rare diseases, because rare diseases are more often than not misdiagnosed several times over many years. And so across our communities, we actually support rare disease companies to identify and support people who actually may otherwise not realize that they are suffering from a rare disease. So we do quite a lot of that at Liquid Grid. So yes, we have many more communities that we want to build, and no doubt in 2019 and 20, we will further expand our portfolio. And in fact, rare diseases is one where we're actually rather interested in trying to pull together a community of people who have rare diseases under the auspices of many people with rare diseases, irrespective of which one it is, have a very similar and tumultuous journey to get to the diagnosis and then to manage their disease afterwards. And I think there's a lot of good that we can do for harmonizing and bringing those people together, those families that have struggled. So lots of opportunity. I appreciate the kind words. It's been a great journey for the last couple of years, really finding a repeatable model for our business.
So just to summarize, if people are interested in joining any of your communities, the best way to find them is to look on Facebook and to search related to the personal issue that they're trying to resolve. And if businesses are interested in interacting with those communities, the best way to do that is to contact you at Liquid Grid. Is that correct?
You got it. Absolutely, 100% right.
So how would someone reach you? What's the best way to reach you at Liquid Grids if you're a business?
Malcolm, MALCOLM @liquidgrids.com.
Well, Malcolm, it's been wonderful having you on the show. It's been incredibly fascinating learning about what you're doing and the community building that you provide and the opportunity for sharing that you're providing to millions of people. And I really want to thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is Minda Wilson for Urgent Care.
It's your health. Stay on top of your own health and medical conditions with MedAdvisor. MedAdvisor is free, private, and personalized information about your specific medical condition. It's literally as simple as signing up and answering some simple questions. MedAdvisor then searches thousands of research papers, clinical trials, guidelines, and even warnings to summarize a totally personalized update regarding your health. MedAdvisor.com. MedAdvisor, MEDIVIZOR.